Okay, welcome back to OK Tech. This is lesson number 11 and it's introducing a large business style of data set so that you can see the kinds of size of data tables. We've worked on a few quite small data tables within the Excel spreadsheet in previous videos. This one will show a much larger example of data which might be more realistic for a business environment. So if you go onto Google and type in Excel sample data, or you can type in more of the details here, Tableau Community Forum Superstore Sales, you should be able to find this link. And from this link there's an example of American store sales data to various customers. So if you click on that link, download it, depending on whichever browser you've got, and then if you click on it to open the XLS file, minimize the internet window, you'll see that it's opened up this example table of data, and it's pretty big. It's got 9,995 rows. The top row is column headers or names of columns, so that's not part of the data, that just tells you what's actually in each column. And if you use the scroll bar, it goes across as far as column U. So there's about 21 rows there, 22 rows, no, 21 rows. Okay, so first thing you'll notice is it says enable editing. You will want to be editing it, so just click on that. It's in a protected view at the moment. That's to protect you from bits of code that might be embedded inside spreadsheets as macros or something else which could perhaps cause problems on your computer system. It's not a problem for this file, so just enable editing, and no liability accepted if the copy you download does have a problem, but I think it's going to be absolutely fine. You can always scan the file with your virus software. So you see macros have been disabled. Macros is the name for little bits of code that could run as programs inside of this. Anyhow, you've got the first thing to do is just to figure out how to actually navigate around it. It's showing basically just sales data, so you've got the row ID, and it's very similar to the layout of a structure in computing called a database. So this would be basically one data table out of a database, and you can tell it's like a database because the first column just has this name row ID, and it basically isn't really any data, it's just what's called an index. So in row 2 you've got index 1, in row 3 you've got index 2, and the indexing has to be unique so that every single row has its own index, and that's just called the index ID or the row ID. And that's a characteristic of a data table from many different kinds of database. And if you look across, this is all the actual company data. So you've got order dates. I'll just zoom in a little bit to make it clearer. Order date 8th of November 2016, shipping date 3 days later, 11th of November 2016, and so on. And it ranges over about 4 or 5 years. Then the ship mode, which is basically the postage class, standard class, first class, same day, second class, and so on. Customer IDs. So it's a little bit like the row ID. The row ID just picks out a row in a table. The customer ID will pick out a specific customer, probably from another table, which would be in a larger database, and that table would probably be called customers or something like that. And then these indexes would point to those particular customers. And you've got some more information here regarding to the customers. So this BH11710 is just an index for Brosina Hoffman. And then the various others, it's all United States, cities, states, postal codes, regions, so the overall region in the country. Product ID, well, that's another one that will list to a catalogue. That would list to a company catalogue. And every single product that this company sells would have this kind of unique ID. And there'll be another data table in the database which lists more details for all of these product IDs. So probably the pricing and the specification and the size, dimensions, the manufacturer, all those sorts of details will be listed in another table. And a more sophisticated spreadsheet would include probably more of these tables, or if it was more likely to be in an actual database, then it will contain all of this raw data and you'd need different software to access all that data. But we can work with this table inside a spreadsheet. And then the category is just the general category of the product and so on. And then right over here, you've got the sales and the profit. And you've got the quantity of the sales and you've got the discount rate. Discount is basically a rate, so 0.7 is a 70% discount, 0.2 is a 20% discount, and so on. So that's just like typical data. It could be in many different arrangements, or there's no sort of specified rule on what you would put. It would depend on the business, and it would also depend on the business how many different indexes there were, whether or not you were indexing more things, like maybe the states might have indexes or the categories might have indexes. It just depends how the whole thing was put together. And this is just one table out of maybe a system. Okay, so if you scroll down, one thing that's a little bit annoying is the top row doesn't allow, doesn't stay where it is. That's been thought of, and it's on, if you go to the top, these tabs, insert page layout, formulas, etc. Click on view, freeze panes, and you can freeze the top row, and that tells you underneath what it is. It's keep the top row visible while scrolling through the rest of the worksheet. So that's very helpful. Or alternatively, if you've got a very large number of columns, you might like to do it the other way. Freeze the first column instead. But notice you can't freeze both. So you can only either freeze the first column or you can freeze the top row. You can't do both at the same time. So you have to decide which one is more useful. Okay, another function I'll show you quickly. Suppose you wanted to split the customer ID into the letters part and the numbers part. There's a way to do that, and it's on the data tab, and you can click this text to columns button, and it says delimited or fixed width. Well, delimited is the more general option here. Characters such as commas or tabs separate each field. You'll very often find when you import a large data set into Excel, there are going to be some columns that you need to split because, for example, they actually contain two sets of data in one column, maybe separated by a tab, or by a semicolon, or by a comma, or by a space, or something of this nature. So let's imagine we need to split the customer ID into two. Well, the symbol is the hyphen, and that isn't an option, so I'll have to put it as other. And then look what happens in this box. We type the hyphen in, it will split it into two columns. And then you can type finish. Notice, by the way, I had to make an empty column here first. If I hadn't made that empty column, what it would have done is put all these numbers on top of the customer name. So it would have overwritten that entire column. So if you're going to split columns, firstly, you have to firstly click on the column header and then insert the column, and then you can split. So we'll do it again, other, finish. Okay, so that's part one on bigger business data tables, which are a bit more realistic for needs in a typical business. I'll move on and show a number of other functions of things that you can do to experiment with this data, manipulate it and so on in the next and final part on this introductory Excel series.